We have no audio recordings of the ancient world. No one alive has ever heard a Roman speak, or a Sanskrit priest chant, or a Proto-Indo-European hunter tell a story. And yet, we can tell you with a fair degree of mathematical certainty almost exactly what they sounded like. Latin, we've got a very strong idea. Proto-Indo-European, spoken maybe 5,000 years ago, we've actually got most of the pieces. Today, I'm going to show you the linguistic DNA that lets us hear the dead. The goal of this is not to give you a semester of historical linguistics in 10 minutes, but rather to give you the basic ideas to understand one aspect of what historical linguists do and how we can actually know these things even. If you're new to the channel, I'm Dr. Taylor Jones. I've got a PhD in linguistics from the University of Pennsylvania, and on the channel, I discuss everything related to language, linguistics, language learning, and culture. If you're into those topics, be sure to subscribe and ring the bell for notifications. Today, I'm going to show you how we got from this to this. I'm Dr. Taylor Jones, and so hesti Language Jones. This is Language Jones. Reconstructing the phonology of a parent language is a fascinating way to see how languages evolve, but as a linguist and a language learner, I know that the real magic happens when you move from the theoretical to the practical. If you've been watching this and thinking about finally mastering one of the modern languages we've discussed, like German, French, or Italian, there has never been a better time to start than right now with Lingoda. Lingoda is a live, interactive language school, not just another app, where you learn from certified native-level teachers in small groups of 5 students or fewer. They've just opened signups for their famous Sprint and Super Sprint challenges. You can choose the Sprint, which is 15 classes a month, or go all in with the Super Sprint at 30 classes a month. If you attend every class, you can earn 100% cash back on the Super Sprint or 50% on the regular Sprint. What makes this specific challenge unique is that it's the last Sprint Lingoda will be hosting for the foreseeable future. If you want to see visible progress and stay consistent with a flexible 24/7 schedule, this is your last chance for a while to join this specific community. Signups are open now but close on May 4th, with classes officially kicking off on May 11th. Secure your spot today by using the link in my description and my personal code, Jones25, to get a discount on your signup. Don't wait until the spots are gone. Start your language journey now. Now, let's get back to how we reconstruct those ancient vowels. My first introduction to historical linguistics was actually really ridiculous. I was working as a jazz musician and paying the rent with my day job at Rosetta Stone and studying languages for fun. I ended up buying a book by Frederick Bodmer called The Loom of Language, an approach to the mastery of many languages. This guy. It's an absolutely delightful read, but I should warn all of you that it's about 80% accurate linguistics, as best as was known in 1944 when it was first published, and about 20% conspiracy theories, quackery, and sick academic burns, like when he writes things like, "Even now, many linguists approach Bopp's agglutination theory squeamishly as if it dealt with the human pudenda." The last part of the book is dedicated to what he perceives as the diseases of language, and the need for a universal constructed language to, I don't know, usher in world peace or something. It's a delightfully written mix of primer on historical linguistics and rantings of a lunatic. It probably deserves its own video. Anyway, on page 237, he's got a table in the middle of a much longer section where he shows a ton of words in various Romance languages all listed side by side. And, as is his point, regular patterns emerge. This table blew my mind. If you were a Portuguese sailor setting sail from Lisbon in the 1500s, when you docked in Barcelona, Marseille, and Genoa, you'd notice already that a lot of the words people used in each of those places sounded uncannily similar to words you use, in a way that they didn't if you sailed the other direction up past England, Germany, and the Scandinavian countries, which all had their own similarities. So let's say you have the idea that Portuguese, Spanish, French, and Italian are related. You might then want to know, before all the sound changes that made them different, what was the original word we're all saying some flavor of? How do you figure that out? Well, first you want to compile a sufficiently large list of words across languages so you can actually make some generalizations and test hypotheses. And you want to do it smartly. If you pick all words like chocolate and tomato and television, for example, you'll come to the conclusion that everything is related, but that's just an accident of borrowing terms for things. So it's better to use words for things that really don't tend to change or be borrowed that often. There's a few variations on the basic idea, but one thing you learn in Intro to Historical Linguistics is a Swadesh list, a few hundred words that are things like kinship terms, mother, father, brother, sister, numbers, meteorological phenomena, snow, rain, body parts, and a few other categories really resistant to change over time. Then you can add from there. Once you have your list, you can start looking for regular correspondences. So let's look at a version of this table. Notice how every single time you see a doubled T in Italian, there's a CH in Spanish. And in Portuguese, you get a T, but it's preceded by a long vowel or a diphthong. And in French, well, French is French. But it preserves the spelling with a now silent T and that I or E that Portuguese has. These are regular correspondences. Similarly, in English and German, there's a regular correspondence between th and duh, as in all these words. Just a quick aside, if you're interested in learning more about linguistics, I'm launching a course later this year called the Language Blueprint. It covers all the major subfields and everything that you'd learn in an Intro to Linguistics, but it's self-paced, online, and a lot more fun than Intro to Linguistics usually is. If you want to know more, get on the waitlist and be alerted when it's available. You can sign up at www.languagejones.com/blueprint. So, what historical linguists did, and still do, is rely on two main principles. First, the majority principle. To simplify, when two languages have the same sound in the same phonetic environment, and a third has a different sound, all things being equal, it's better to assume the majority retained the older sound. Here's an example. Notice how Italian, Spanish, and Portuguese all have O, and French consistently has U in the related words? We posit that O is likely the older form. But that doesn't always provide a solution. Think back to detto, dicho, dito, di. That works for the vowel, it was probably E, but what about the consonant after it? This is where the most natural development principle comes into play. Some sound changes happen over and over again, and we've seen them documented in real time. In many cases, they have physiological reasons for happening. So, for instance, K sounds often become ch sounds through a process of palatalization. The basic idea is that when you lift the back of your tongue towards your velum, as you do when you make a k sound, if it's followed by a high vowel like u or e, or if it's at the end of a word, the body of your tongue is already right up near your palate, and it's easy to go from a k sound to a k sound, as in Persian bozorg, and from there to ch. This is why it's a kirk in a lot of Germanic languages, but it's a church in English. There are lots of these pathways. For instance, it's more common for a consonant between vowels to become voiced than to lose its voicing. It's more common for the same consonant to become a fricative, because we're just kind of gesturing at the consonant in quick speech. It's more common for consonants at the end of a word to lose voicing. And there's common pathways. S almost always becomes H almost always disappears given a long enough time frame. T becomes S, and then does that whole pathway, or a glottal stop, and then disappears eventually. These changes are things that happen naturally over time as children acquire the language from generation to generation. And yes, that palatalization process is why we all say generation and not generation. I'm not going to do all the work, but the idea behind solving that Romance language problem is an interesting one about timing. Italian has a doubled consonant, and Spanish and Portuguese have a long vowel. And with more data, we see some interesting patterns. Italian's two T's is often PT in Romanian, where notte corresponds to noapte. Forgive my pronunciation. Now, the high vowel thing gives us a clue, and ultimately a reconstruction of Proto-Romance posits something that looks like noct. And the thing is, we know that Portuguese, Spanish, French, and Italian are actually related because not only do we know the history, that they were all subjugated by the Roman Empire, and hence the term Romance languages, but we also know what the parent language was like because we have a lot of documents from that language. So we can check our work. One cool thing is that the process of reconstruction can help us figure out exactly how Latin sounded, so we know that nobody was saying Cicero and Caesar, but rather Cicero and Kaiser. But the crazy thing about historical reconstruction is that we also reconstructed a bunch of words that are unattested in any of our written Latin corpora. We reconstructed Vulgar Latin. For instance, in classical Latin sources, horses are equus. But when you reconstruct from the descendant languages, you get caballos. Classical Latin has ignis, like ignition for fire, but fuoco, fuego, and fu point us towards focu. Felis, like feline, is in classical sources, but gatto, gato, and sha point us towards gatos. As early as 1597, you have people like the delightfully named Bonaventure Vulcanius noting similarities between much more distant languages, like German and Persian. And in the 1700s, you have another language Jones, William Jones, who popularized the idea that Latin, Greek, and Sanskrit sure do look about as related to each other as Spanish, French, and Italian. And if we can reconstruct a form of Latin from the Romance languages, what happens when we do the same with Latin, Greek, and Sanskrit? How far back can we go? It turns out we can go about 5,000 years back before we completely run out of attested languages to work backwards from. And we start getting into fuzzy territory where we end up using symbols like H1, H2, H3 with subscripts because we know that they were some kind of laryngeal based on their effects on nearby sounds, but we can't say with certainty exactly which throaty kinds of sounds they were. Proto-Indo-European, the hypothetical reconstructed oldest ancestor language of everything from English to Spanish to Greek to Hindi, is a whole fascinating world and a topic that deserves its own video. But while it's the triumph of historical reconstruction, it's not the only case. I know linguists who work on historical reconstruction of the parent languages of Austronesian languages, for instance, or for Bantu languages, or Semitic languages. The key that I want you to leave this video understanding is that linguists don't do etymology by just saying, oh, that looks like this, and this makes me think of that, and so on and so forth. Instead, historical linguists carefully construct datasets across multiple languages and then systematically look for patterns and test hypotheses about those patterns until they can slowly, meticulously arrive at a logically defensible reconstruction. And they use two key principles, the majority principle and the most natural development principle. I remember doing problem sets in grad school for historical linguistics, where we reconstructed Proto-Algonquian from Cree, Ojibwe, Fox, and others. Fun aside, the professor did not get why some of the students kept asking, what does the fox say? What does the fox say? But once you've done that, you really can't ever go back to Sudoku. If you like what I'm doing with the channel, you can support it on YouTube with super thanks or over on Patreon at patreon.com/languagejones. Please leave a comment, they're great for the algorithm, and subscribe if you haven't already. And don't forget, if you'd like to learn the foundations of linguistics with videos in my signature style, but ones that really get at the heart of linguistics in a way that might not do so well on the YouTube algorithm, don't forget to head over to languagejones.com/blueprint to sign up for more information. Until next time, happy learning.